There a second to that? We have a second. All in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye. Opposed? Agenda is approved, and we need to elect a clerk. We happen to have a practiced clerk to my right, your left, in the front row, who would make a great candidate, but any could be nominated. Mr. March.
I have the pleasure of nominating Jay Gardner.
Jay Gardner has been nominated as clerk. Is there a second? We have several seconds. All in favor, please say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. A brief update then on so what I'm going to do is we're going to move as quickly as we can through these. I'm not going to leave a lot of time for questions, but if there is a kind of burning question, then by all means, please raise your hand. Yes. No, I did not. That's right. I said welcome in prayer. So I thought I'd finish the initial stuff and then I pray. You can tell I'm trying to move quickly here. So we'll try to move quickly through. If you do have a burning important question, then by all means, you certainly have the right to raise your hand and ask it. But I'm not going to leave long pauses for questions just because we've got a lot to get covered this evening. So indeed, let's go to prayer and ask the Lord to bless our time this evening. Praise the Lord. Praise, O servants of the Lord. Praise the name of the Lord. Blessed be the name of the Lord from this time forth and forevermore. From the rising of the sun to its setting, the name of the Lord is to be praised. Almighty God, our Heavenly Father, indeed, we give you praise and honor and glory. You are worthy of our time and attention. You are worthy of our praise and worship. You are worthy of being enthroned in the heavens and in our hearts. We pray that during this meeting of this congregation this evening, it would be your delight to bless us, to show us mercy and kindness yet again, as you have done so with such clarity in our Lord Jesus Christ. Please be clear to us as we communicate with one another, as we share the good things that you are doing in this church, the challenges that you have given to us that we might overcome them, what may even be a difference of opinion that you may give us that we might overcome it in love and care. We pray that in all things we would listen well, we would speak with wisdom, and we would honor in your name. Through Christ our Lord we pray. Amen. Okay, thank you. And thanks for the reminder. So I'll offer a brief session update. The session, as you know, consists of the ruling elders and the elected teaching elder. We have an assistant pastor, Matt, who does not serve on the session, but he attends our meetings and offers wisdom. And so a few things from this past year, we were able, number one, to bring on Matt, to call him as an assistant pastor. We're delighted to be able to do so. It's a part-time position at this point, but we are so glad to have Matt with us. We're also able to move Bo Waldo into what we call a staff position as a chaplain in residence. We were not able to make Bo a pastor for a number of reasons, including his presbytery and the local command in the J-Bear. And so we created a staff position, and what that simply means is that we endorse Bo to be among you and to offer pastoral services as he's available. We were able to finish with a longstanding project of our purpose and values statement, and so we're looking to that as a guiding document, and with increasing frequency, hope to use that as a sort of North Star that will provide direction for us. I can tell you that we've been conducting elder training, and as you know, we have two candidates right now, Lyle and Ron. Training has gone on for very long. Part of the length of that was because of Lyle's time in the field, and so we kind of put a pause on things, and I was able to spend a little more time with Ron. But overall, both of these men have been very patient with the extended time it's taken, and in the future, we have something of a streamlined process that I think will move quicker through a shorter curriculum, and our plan is at this point to have nominations for elder every other year, and then nominations for deacon on opposite years. undergo training in the spring, and then by early summer be ready for a vote. I can just tell you that it's a great delight to serve on the session, that the men have been working well together. There's a great spirit of unity among the members of the session, a great brotherly warmth, and any debates or disagreements have certainly not been personal, but have been about the items that we're debating. So I always have whenever I leave a session meeting, I have a warm feeling about the men I work with and what we've been doing. I'll just offer a brief word for myself as the pastor of the church. It's been yet another year in which it's been a delight and a challenge to serve you, and I hope I've done so well, and always beg your forgiveness for the failures to do so better. We spend a lot of time, working on teaching materials, especially looking ahead to Sunday schools, liturgy, and preaching, and also developing new leaders with training, overseeing various ministries in the church, working with staff, and personally my responsibilities with Presbyterian General Assembly. Presbytery has had lower responsibilities recently because I am serving with the review of Presbytery records, which is a committee of the General Assembly. And so I have to take an annual trip that the GA pays for to go to Atlanta to spend time reading minutes of other presbyteries and finding if there are any problems with them. I always enjoy spending time with people individually. I would like to do so more as time allows. I enjoy personal counseling and home visits, and I'm just striving to have more time to do those things as available. So that's it for me. If you have burning questions, you're certainly permitted to ask them now, but otherwise, please find me at a later time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Let me ask Matt to come up briefly and just tell us a little bit about his own ministry.
I'm Matt Teeslink. If we haven't met, it's been a pleasure to join you all up here. My family and I have been here a year, but as assistant part-time pastor, it's going well. I mostly spend the afternoons here. I spend the morning running my kids around, and that keeps me quite busy. But it's good to be here in the afternoon and attending events and meetings in the evenings. The areas what I spend my time doing is areas of youth ministry, community groups, along with Chris Burgess, who will give that report in a little bit. And I am the session liaison to the diaconate. And during this season of the life of our church, I am in the process of adding deacon assistants to assist the diaconate, and we'll be training up the deacon candidates. So spending quite a bit of time building up that training. Will be an intensive 6-session sprint training this spring. But all of those are going well, and looking forward to the year ahead. So that's what I have.
Okay, let me invite our deacon representative up, and I know Willie will be coming up to talk about the budget. And so Willie, if you want to start with the get us going with the budget here. Okay.
I can serve as the deacon representative and tell you that we are excited. We have 6 deacon candidates, and we'll be going through that training, but we will be a little light before they come on board in May, and so we are lifting up some deacon assistants. It is not a lesser office than deacon. It's just different. They'll be more assigned to specific tasks that way. The deacons continue to care for people both inside our church body and those that are come to our need from beyond. And it's just a good time to note that if those needs arise in your life or in the life of someone you know, to please let the deacons know. These are men that love caring for people in general and for this body in particular. And the deacons aren't just people that unlock doors, but they care and they serve people as well. And so the deacons are excited about that. The lighting project that was talked about a year ago, the lights are here. Willie may have more details on the timeline of that, but we're excited for that project to continue to move forward. And we are putting feelers out to what a playground might look like on the property. So that is just, it's a glimmer of what might come in the future, much like the lighting project was a year ago. So we don't have details about what, where, or when, but that's kind of a dream project that we hope to maybe be on the horizon. So I think that covers kind of the nuts and bolts of deacon ministry. We care for people inside the church, outside the church, and the property. So, hopefully we'll raise up some new deacons and definitely some deacon assistants this year. So those individuals and names will be forthcoming as we make progress on both of those fronts. So we're excited. It's always good to have more laborers to be on the ground doing the work. So, and with that, I will turn it over to Willie, who is coming off of sabbatical, seeing our time of need and the deacon suck that Houston has been on our church. So we're excited to have Willie back as deacon and treasurer, and he is going to come with lots of knowledge and lots of numbers. So get excited. There you go. They're excited for you.
So as I left, I prepared a budget. As I come back, I'm explaining Lincoln's budget to you. I believe I understand it. I will tell you what cliff notes of what I've seen in my absence. We thought we were aggressively scheduling or budgeting for 2022 as we went out the door, and the Lord just did more than we could ask or imagine. $768,000 in income last year. So that's a big number. I'm looking at, if you need a copy, I think everybody should have one. I'm on page 1. From an income, well, first thing, let me follow my sword. I saw a lot of spreadsheets, and this is the one I globbed onto and made a few tweaks to make it all hopefully make sense to you. I have a very simple mind. I'm not an accountant, so 1 + 1 = 2, and there's no amortization schedule. So I'll try to explain it in those terms. First thing I'll call attention to, it says 2022 budget. That is a baseline of how we get to 2023 and so on, and then we forgot to change the field. This is 2023's budget, not 2022's. So from an income perspective, we actually went conservative with $700,000. When you looked at the 2021 actuals, and those were actually, there were a little bit pandemic numbers, but we're budgeting $120,000 over the 2021. If God continues to be generous to us, I'm sure we'll find uses for those funds. I'm not going to go through the line items. Our payroll is up, and you can kind of compare it to the 2022 actuals. Our payroll is up significantly. We gave the pastor up a little bit towards the cost of living raise. We added a full-time addition, and we have an intern at $40,000 budgeted for. Now that's not broken down by how much is it going to be in travel. There's some side notes of housing and tuition assistance and things, but that's a placeholder, much as Matt Teesling's was a placeholder last year. came to be reality. Actually, he was a placeholder the year before too. He just hadn't come yet. The Lord hadn't given him to us. So I don't know what name goes on the intern or if that's actually going to become real this year, but it's in the budget, at least at 40,000. That is fairly light, but an intern, we'll talk more about details of whether that's a 12-month assignment or what that looks like. And so some of that could potentially, because we don't have them yet, bleed into next year, right? Something like that. So our total payroll is up significantly, and it's a big part of our budget's increases. Down to pastoral expense, it's up a little bit. And part of the reason, obviously, Matt has expenses that are going to go even with his part-time position, and we're using the things that are at our disposal, specifically travel and conferences are getting used. The pastors are buying books. They're taking people to lunch. So that's a slight increase, which based on what my price of gas is, that's actually probably below the national average, if you will, for just what we would expect things to have to go up. On the worship side, we've budgeted, again, we tend to budget to encourage music and things like that. Last year, we budgeted an extra $1,000 for the nursery, and only $100 got spent, but we're going to go ahead and budget again this year for that $1,000. So that's where you look at the actuals numbers. Sometimes those are different, quite a bit different, because maybe we didn't use the budget for one reason or another. I'll call out under evangelism that we're actually adding a ministry of Interior Alaska Radio. Is that right? And so that's part of the increase that you're seeing on that line item. And I'm kind of just hitting the big bullets here. Under education, it's always hard to budget for. It has to do with curriculum cycles and things like that. So we take our best guess and then we buy what we need and look at it again next year. On page 2 then, church life is up very significantly. Part of that is that we have presbytery hosting coming this year, and that is a done deal. So the expenses are real for that. In addition to that, some of you, or many of you, are participating one way or another in Word on Wednesday. And we are actually catering a lot of that food. So we're spending a good bit, or have budgeted for a good bit more for that. Now, I believe that budget, some of it may be used. It was lower than this, and I told Lincoln he needed to budget a lot because I didn't want people questioning whether I bought canes or pizza. So that's supposed to be funny, by the way. But in any case, that's the components of why you see such a big jump around church life, is because the life of the church is getting more expanded, and there's some cost to that.
So is that cost in the events hospitality?
It is. The WOW costs are within the events hospitality. And then again, we have, this year we're talking about an annual conference. Again, last year we had good ideas around a men's retreat and so on, and we didn't get to all that stuff. That could happen again this year. So let me finish, and then I'll give you a summation of how I think things will probably play out. Around the presbytery, when Lincoln put this together, he didn't have all of his numbers because numbers are continuing, and he budgeted against. I think we may be a few dollars light on the presbytery expenses with the travel. Now, we're not sending people out, so maybe we actually do a pickup there. But with additional pastors going to meetings, we may be close on that particular line item. Facility fees, there's a big jump there, and I'll just call your attention to one line item. That's the other facility and maintenance at $75,000. That is where we discussed a playground. Many of you might have noticed our parking lot could use some help, right? There's several things out there that we need to pay attention to. Most of those fees typically come under facility assets and equipment. However, the lighting project is also not, we bought the lights, we still got to get them installed. So some of that money is going to end up finishing the lighting project as well this year. So that's why there's a pretty significant jump from last year into this year. We've got some plans, and we're trying to get some money kind of set aside for that. On the administrative side, considering the growth, we're not going up very much. So I think that's a good commentary there. We've added a missionary in Mark Kuo this year, and we've increased our support for a couple of other missionaries, if you'll notice the jumps in there. I wasn't involved in that conversation, but I'm very thrilled with that because I've always felt like missions should be a piece, a percentage, if you will, just like we in our wealth should be giving back to some extent, just like we tithe to the Lord. Well, the Lord has blessed us so much we should be tithing to missions. That's just, I heard a sermon that way once and it stuck. So I'm glad we've increased because our income has significantly increased. You'll see benevolence in there. That's a budget line item, but typically benevolence is just a placeholder. That's our mercy fund. If there's needs out there for folks, we don't budget for that. We can't budget for that, but we need a placeholder for that. And now I'll jump into philosophically the budget. The budget is a place to hold ourselves accountable, to be able to use, but we flex as needed. We're not the government here. If it's not in the budget, doesn't mean we won't do it if it's the right thing to do. And if it's in the budget and we're not ready, the Lord hasn't filled the shed all the way on the way. This, giving is off during pandemic, whatever those things are, we'll make adjustments and business decisions based on need. If I've been serving here a long time. If you go to the session and say, this is a need, and the Lord is blessing us, we have cash, and not the last of our cash, we'll make good decisions based on that. The lighting project wasn't budgeted last year. A parishioner gave some money, and we said, look, it's the right thing to do. It's going to make this worship space, and so we started to work on that. We need to keep our kids safe, so we have a parking some money in the budget to start looking at what would it take to do a good quality, safe playground. Those things are going to flex as we go. All that to say, we get to the bottom here. The $55,000 is affecting our cash flow at the building principal cost, and that's a very round number. It could be $56,500 or $57,000. But in essence, those are equities that continue to show up. We pay $9,000 a month for our mortgage, $108,000 a year plus or minus, and a lot of that goes to interest, about 50%, and 50% goes to the principal. It's hard to show that on an accounting sheet and make it all make sense, so that $55,200 is basically a correction. So to summarize, if we take in the $700,000 and we spend every dollar, we will be losing, from a cash perspective, $89,972. We're budgeting aggressively. We have interns. We have things that we don't budget for every year in there. And I want that to scare you. We have over $500,000, to be exact, $570,350 at the end of the year. So we have over $500,000 in cash. Part of the reason we're talking about the parking lot, making sure we fully fund intern, things like that, is because the Lord is giving us money to use in ministry, and it's incumbent on us as stewards to figure out what that ministry is and still allow us the flexibility to do the right thing. So I'll take questions now on anything that I've outlined. Hopefully that's a reasonable explanation. The Lord has blessed us. We picked up $200,000 in cash last year. That's almost unbelievable, and very much a spike. There were a few things that kind of one-time gifts that we probably won't get year after year, but we have been blessed, and it's really a pleasure to be able to stand up here and know that I don't have to worry about the next offering before I can pay the pastor. I've served there too, and that's not as much fun, trust me. Questions? Beth?
So before, when we were saving up money to buy a church, when we went over budget, we took in more, so we put a certain percentage into the building fund.
Correct.
Are we still doing that toward our mortgage?
No. So was that loud enough for everybody in the back? Do I need to re-articulate the question, or is that good? Can I answer it?
It was good for me. That was my same question.
So I've been out a year, so I don't know everything that's been, but quite frequently it comes to me, what should we do about retiring our mortgage? So let's be clear on that. That question is asked. And my answer to that is I'm glad I don't have to make that decision on my own. This past year, as this cash showed up, the deacons have been praying about and how do we address having that much cash and where should that go? So it's forefront on our mind. We need buffer. We need operating expense for another pandemic that the bills keep coming in, but maybe the income doesn't for some period of time. But I would agree with you that we need to look at that. The last time we looked at it, at the interest rate that we had, it and the amount of cash we had at that point, it did not make sense to use our cash to pay down a reasonably low interest rate. Now that was when, after we moved in, we didn't know what other repairs and things we would be facing. So we need to continue to keep an eye on that. But there's not been, and even the other policy was somewhat informal, but there's not been a formal or informal policy that says when we get to this point, we should look at that. But no, we are looking at it to make sure that we're being good stewards, again, of God's money. Part of that is not paying interest, to be honest. Yeah.
However, part of the reason we did that, and we supported that as a congregation, was anything over what we had to have for those purposes of meeting our expenses and doing those things would be dedicated to someday getting built. Okay?
Agreed.
Well, there's a point at which we're going to say, shall we build a new building? Shall we do this? Shall we do that? Which are substantial things, and that's not the time to decide, hey, let's start a 20-year plan to do that. It's worth starting when we're still working towards that. Definitely keeping in mind keeping a buffer.
Yep, that's
Plenty of a buffer.
good point. I couldn't agree more, Steve. Other questions? Thank you.
Great. Well done, Willie. Thank you. Let me invite Barb. Do you want to talk briefly about music? Or is that, you're going to have Jay do that? And then men's ministry is on deck. I see Jay coming up. Jay, did you want to take? Okay.
Well, the good news is you get to see me 3 times tonight. Somehow I got on that list this year. I don't have a ton to say about music ministry. I think you all know. If you don't, come talk to me. My goal here with music is to get you singing, nothing else. That's my biggest goal. What I try to do all year. We go through about 125 to 150 hymns a year. I'm always happy for new ones, always happy for suggestions, but I also try and keep some of the favorites in there because I want our kids to learn hymns, and hymns are dying across the PCA even. So I have a little bit of a burning personal desire to do that. We've added a couple pianists. We've added Christine Yeager, Adeline Gardner, which is great. It's amazing. They're both really, really very capable, and I'm excited to just let them go. Because for all of us, for me and for Jay and for Ron, we've been running this ship for a while, and I think it's nice to have a few extra people joining in. Obviously, we've added more singing with during communion and for the Gloria Patri. I think that's great. It means you guys have to sing more, gives more opportunities to add music. But I'm always open to feedback. I'll chat with you about it anytime. I always like to point out when I do these things how you can pray for the music here. The ministry here is meant to help people sing, but it's also, you've got people working hard. And they're doing it behind the scenes. I mean, it's not really behind the scenes, but they do stuff during the week. Would you keep the pianists in your prayer? Last year, I jokingly said, would you give them gratitude every once in a while? You don't actually have to tell them they did a good job. You just have to say thanks for playing. But that's always appreciated because I think it takes more than a lot of people assume to be up here. You're in the spotlight. There's criticism, all that type of stuff. So it feels like a little bit of courage every time we have to go up there. So especially for the new pianists. So, appreciation is great, but also prayer, because we can always have change. There can always be new things. and I want it to continue to grow. So keep praying. Talk to me if you have questions, and I'm more than happy to answer as much as I can.
Shout out to Kale Pastorek, who would be up here if he weren't in Hawaii for a month. Hi, Kale. Yeah. This men's ministry, it'll be brief. Social events involving fires is an important part of men's ministry. We stand around and talk about manly things like covenant and the fruit of the Spirit, things like that, right? The men's Bible study on Wednesdays has been a key feature. It started out well it ended well. Started with 20 guys and ended with 12 or so. Men, this is not guilt tripping, but if you have your Wednesday available, 3 weeks from now will be the next one. And we're working still to assemble a men's conference. We're communicating with Brian Chappell. He's the stated clerk of the PCA to speak this year, but we don't have that secured yet. We're working on that. Any questions?
Women's, and here comes Barbara Strong again, women's ministry, and then youth, and then we'll hear from foreign missions.
It's me again. So I'm kind of picking up notes from Heidi because she's not here. She usually runs these things. Lots of props to her. So currently the women's ministry has Tuesday morning prayer group at Bernadette March's house. Our WOW Wednesday night Bible study women's is currently studying Romans. And the Thursday morning Bible study has begun this semester, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians. That study has childcare this year, so if you're not there and you want to be there, and you got kids, it's there. The women's ministry talked a little bit this last year about the rising costs of doing our retreat out of town, and kind of made the decision to move that kind of a retreat every other year, just to save costs, because it's very expensive. So this last year we did more of a day-long retreat here within the church, and the goal for this coming year is probably, I think it's Alyeska, but I can't promise you that. We've had a few people step up to do some random women's nights, which are always appreciated. We can always, we always get, if anyone is ever interested in doing that, you should always come talk to me or Bernadette or Beth Sprano or Heidi, because we always love to have people step up and do some stuff if they'd like. If any of you are interested, you ladies are interested in being part of the committee, come talk to us too. We're always happy to have people join. And then finally, Heidi said that there looks to be a summer book club is also going to start again this year. They had a pretty successful one last year, but the book hasn't been chosen yet.
Youth ministry, a brand new thing. There was not a youth report last year at this time because it didn't exist. So I'm excited to be up here and to share that it is happening. Right now, what it looks like is there is a junior high time with me during Word on Wednesday, and Julie Burgess is with the high school girls during WOW. So those are the regular happenings in the youth category. We will be taking a high school mission trip this year to Sacred Road in the Yakima Reservation area. And so we're excited to do that towards the end of June. So there are 6 students, myself, and a chaperone. And so we're excited about that. We hope that will be a launching point for some service opportunities that not only will be mission trip, summer-based, but monthly opportunities in that realm. And then as we look towards next year, we are toying with what it would look like to have another something on a regular basis for our youth. So my focus has mainly been on the junior high to build a strong foundation as those students get older. Our high schoolers are very busy, and many of them are active in other ministries. And so I didn't want to create competing ministries, but I'm happy to have Julie Burgess on our team leading that effort on Wednesday nights. So my focus is junior high and building up from there. Service is going to be a part of it as we go forward, and it's a new thing, so there's new opportunities, and I don't know what it will look like when I hopefully stand up here next year, but I'm excited to continue to invest in the youth of this church.
Foreign missions team. The team itself is Jackie Bennett and Sarah Freswick and Sean Wooten. Shout out to Sean, who's in Hawaii. Jackie's not here tonight. Sarah's carrying around a ton of bricks lately. Sarah, if you want to come up and do this, go ahead. No, okay. So there's a charter for this team. One of the main duties of this foreign mission team is to identify good candidates for faith to support good missionary candidates. There's a charter for this team. The summary of the points for supporting the criteria for screening a missionary would be some are doctrinal things like being committed to Orthodox Protestant Christianity. There's some about accountability, being accountable to some accountability organization, and reporting back to us if we're supporting them. And being involved in person-to-person mission, as distinct from sort of backroom work that's important but not our thing, like creating media. These have to be people who are on the front lines. And another point is supporting the indigenous church through church planting, discipleship ministry that feeds the local church. The committee has done that, and they have found Mark Quo. Good job, team. It's as though, I don't know which way to say this, it's as though Mark Quo was the poster child of these criteria, or these criteria were written for Mark Quo. He fits perfectly. He's Chinese. He grew up in Taiwan. He plans to minister there. He recently graduated from Greenville Theological Seminary, a very reformed place. I'm not sure of the chronology. He either is or will be soon a teaching elder at Calvary Presbytery, which is in South Carolina. And he's preparing now to go from the U.S. to Taiwan. By preparing, I mean, among other things, he's fundraising and establishing relationships. Like with us, he'll be here he'll be preaching 2 Sundays from now. Yeah. Okay. And the foreign missions team and the session worked with Mark, met with him by Zoom and I think face-to-face too, in Jared's case, to approve him as a missionary for faith. So that's all good news. And we're pretty excited to add Mark to support at faith. Support means money, but it also means that we collectively and you individually pray for him, right? Along with our other missionaries who are Julian Zug, who's been here a number of times. He's in what's now called MINTS. It used to be Miami International Theological Seminary. That's where MINTS comes from, but it's just MINTS now. It's a worldwide ministry focusing mainly on Africa. Jamie and Jackie Gildard are in Toulouse, France. Kirby Figueres is in the Philippines. Abraham and Esther, who Abraham was just here, I guess it was a couple months ago by now, are working in India. And then our missionaries to Russia, their names will not be mentioned due to security issues. That's the report on One more thing. There's only 3 on this team, and it's a lot of work. So if you would be interested in supporting our foreign missions efforts, here's an opportunity. Any questions?
I'm going to invite Matt up in just a moment. I'm sorry, Chris. I'll address the confusion there in just a second. So clearly, if you want to go to Hawaii, just serve on a team here in the church, and you'll get there. Uh, so I did want to mention one change that we made in the life of the church here is sort of some of the structure of oversight that we have in the church. So you notice that we've had sometimes elders come up and sometimes members of the congregation. So every team that we have, every ministry team that we have, some have many volunteers, some have very few. But what we did is make sure that every team has an elder who is serving as an overseer. It might sound like a kind of intimidating word, but it's a very biblical word. You may remember from Philippians 1:1. Elders are overseers. And so we have an elder overseeing every ministry team in the church, and then teams have various leaders of those ministries. So, for example, I'm overseeing nursery, but Kelly Nagel is really the ministry leader. Some overseers have more to do with that ministry. Others, I don't have a lot to do with nursery. I just kind of check in with Kelly and help be a resource for her. So that's why we have both Matt and Chris involved with community groups, and hopefully that makes sense to you. And so now I get to invite Chris up, and then Jeff will be coming up for a triple header, I believe.
Hello, I'm Chris Burgess. For those of you who don't know me, as Jared mentioned, community group coordinator, kind of starting out about beginning of last year. I'm excited to share that the community group ministry is really growing and thriving, I would say, from most of the reports we hear. We're at 5 groups now. Really quick, for anyone who's not in a group and wants to know about them, it's a time every other week approximately, alternating schedule from the Word on Wednesdays. We meet at someone's house, so outside of the church, and it's kind of a focused time in sharing a meal and just fellowship over the meal, and then focused time in prayer, sharing prayer requests and praying as a group, and then a Bible-centered discussion. The biblical passages are coming from the church Bible reading plan, the family Bible reading plan, so there's no extra reading assignment if you're already kind of following that. And we've had a lot of good discussions come out of that. And I would also say that community groups are, one thing that's cool about them is we don't often think about them as a ministry as much as we should. We've had the pleasure of seeing some actually individuals come to faith and attribute a lot of that to the community groups, and that's been really exciting and something that I think we've got a lot more potential for, to invite your friends who don't come to church. So the 5 groups right now, we've got a Sunday group after church at the Sojay's house. There's a Tuesday night group, 5:30 to 7:30. That's hosted by the Lindsays and then led by Brian Anderson. Wednesday has 2 groups, one at the Krulish's house and one at our house, the Burgesses. And then there's a Thursday night group at the Pastrick's house. So lots of options, but we've got fairly good participation as it is in the church, but much room for more to join groups. And I would also say our group sizes right now are on the full side. 25 to 35, maybe even more in some cases, in some of these groups, and being a little bit on the lower end of that is usually ideal. So we're looking at hopefully being able to add a group or 2 in the next year, and for that we're just looking for people who would be willing to host and lead. It's not a huge commitment. You don't have to do both. You can only be able to do one or the other. And both Matt, I work pretty closely with Matt, and we're both willing to help you out the whole way, kind of getting ready and prepared for that. That is pretty much it. If anybody here wants to join a group, maybe the night of the weeks that are offered don't work for you or the times, still come talk to me, because that's one way we can figure out how to add new groups is what gaps are we needing to fill. So if you want to join a group and you just haven't yet, come talk to me. If you want to join a group and you don't have one that fits, still come talk to me or Matt, and we'd love to try to help plug you into one. I think that's it. Any questions about community groups? Cool. Thank you.
Triple headers a lot, so Ellen's going to help me. But for Christian education, everybody thinks about church discipline as this bad, big, heavy stick, but building disciples is really what church discipline's about, and part of that is teaching. And so that's what I see our children's as well as our adult programs helping us do, is disciple people. And so with this, I'll give Ellen the floor to give a short report on our children's program.
Hi. We have about 35 families with Sunday school age children that attend our church regularly. Among them are 96 children attending regularly, and that's a huge responsibility. So we have a huge list of people involved with making that happen. The curriculum we use is Great Commission Publications, and we chose that because it's biblically based. It's reformed in focus and philosophy, and it's covenantal, and it has organized scripted lessons so the teachers can be prepared fairly quickly for the class, and it can also allow substitutes to slide in pretty easily. Along with the daily or the Sunday classes, there's take-home papers that allow for further study at home with parents, which is the ideal place to be learning about our Lord. And our toddler through fourth grade classes use a program called Show Me Jesus, and it's focused on God as sovereign creator, redeemer, and king. Teachers and helpers for the 2 and 3 year olds are Lacey Pastrick, who's in Hawaii, and Catherine Waldo. 4 year olds and 5 year olds is Catherine Teeslink, assisted as needed by her husband. And first and second graders have Hannah Alsop and Monique Gardner. Third and fourth graders have Heidi Vibreggi and Kristen Sedano. And our fifth and sixth grade class is a program called Genesis to Revelation. It's kind of a survey or overview of the whole Bible, so it's kind of high level, hitting high points of the scriptures. And currently they're studying Exodus through Ruth, and we'll begin 1 Samuel through Esther in a few weeks. That class is taught by Karen Long. I teach our 7th and 8th graders, junior high school aged kids, and we are using a product called God's Promises, which is very covenantal based. So it goes through Old Testament and New Testament, focusing on God's promises and Him as a promised keeper. We are right now studying the Gospel of Matthew, and we'll be moving to the Gospel of Luke in a few weeks. High schoolers are taught by Sean Wooten and Josiah Nagel, who are in Hawaii. And right now we changed things up a little bit, and we're doing a program called Digging Deeper, which is a study of the Westminster Shorter Confession. And the volume 1 that they're doing is several weeks long, and it goes through question 38. And at some point, probably next year, we'll begin the second volume, which will continue through the Shorter Catechism. But in the meantime, when this product is finished, we'll go back to study of Philippians. So traditionally, we've been using, what is it called? So What is the program? And it sounds flippant, but it really is so what for high schoolers. So they get deeper meaning on many of the New Testament books, as well as some topical studies on basically how to live in the world we live in. And I'd like to thank all the teachers and thank all the substitutes. It's really wonderful to have a handful of folks I can go to in a pinch or plan ahead. Julie Burgess and Casey Boozma and Matt Teeslink and Bo, Waldo, and Sarah Freswick are go-to people that are always willing to say yes. And if anybody else wants to be someone like that, I would love to hear from you and get you on my list. Thank you.
So it's a pretty big ministry. We set apart to say what it was for. It's kind of an entry level to mid-level, intermediate level is kind of what we're looking at there. We really see our jobs as augmenting parents teaching their children, because that's the biblical model. Is the parents are in charge of making sure that their kids are raised in the way of the Lord, right? So we are here to augment that. Some parents are really well equipped for that, and so the material might be a little light for them, and they're going to augment by teaching at home those things. While we may get parents who don't know the thing about the Bible, and their kids have never been exposed to any of these concepts, much less covenant or his other aspects of things that we treasure as Reformed folks. So that's kind of what our shot is on Sunday school, to the point where we have an adult program that is now also set up through the help of Pastor Krulish to give us a rotation, 5 to 6 week classes that give us exposure to doctrine, Christian education, or Christian experience and Bible in a way that over a 4-year period, you're going to get exposed to all the major areas. And we've been having people come to us like, hey, how do I learn all the things I need to do to be an officer, for instance, in the church? Well, this is a way to do that. Attend those classes. So if you're also not getting those classes or getting pieces of those classes, then we maybe need to come up with other ways to do that. But this is a systematic way that we can go make sure we're covering everything, and if people are attending, they're getting the meat that they need. So that's the intent behind that program. I'd like to say that we work in concert with the men's and women's Bible studies, what does happen in the community groups. And then we also have some deep discipleship groups that are meeting. Those are kind of, I don't want to say they're invite only, but there's only a small, it's designed to be just a few right now men that are meeting together to do that. And that is really to go deep into certain of these subjects. So I'm not going to speak much more on that, but I do see our ministry dovetailing into that as far as Christian education goes. That's all I'm going to say about that. Any questions on Christian education for our church? Okay. Number 2, events. I'm not designed to plan and orchestrate all events. That's not my job. My job is to oversee that. So if you have an event that you see, and let me also delineate. If you want to have a birthday party at the church, I don't need to know about that. The deacons have put together a facility use policy, and that policy is what will govern how that works and how you do that and whether you want to sign up for that. But if you have an event that is going on that you would like to be sponsored by the church, something that Faith Presbyterian Church will be sponsoring and endorsing, that's something that I would like to hear about. And that's just so that we have one, either yes, we want to do that, or we don't, kind of an up or down, yes or no on that. Or maybe there's some kind of way we can partner in a way that's more appropriate than, maybe your vision of that is. So as those things come up, just bring those to me. We can talk that stuff out and try to get to an agreed upon way forward. If there are, other than that, if there are things going on, especially we've got small events, large events, presbyteries coming on, we maybe have this large conference. Those are things that I would hope to at least get a copy of an email on, so I know what's going on. I don't need heavy involvement, but at least knowledge of, so that when the session asks me, what's going on with this? I can say, yeah, this is what's going on because they told me. So that's kind of the events committee. And then finally, sacraments. I'm just overseeing this. It's pretty easy because we have a lot of great faithful servants. One being Hannah Allsup, setting it up pretty much every week. So praise God for her and her willingness to do that. Such a quiet, great servant. And then most of our young ladies after the service will clean up. So thank you to all of them who are involved in that ministry for the Lord's Supper. We've added singing, as Barbara mentioned, and as far as that ministry goes. And then finally, baptism. Not much to say there. I just oversee it. Hopefully, we remember to put warm water in there and have towels. Always trying to improve things. So if you guys have ideas on how to improve what we're doing or want to change something up, bring it to me, and then I can bring it to the session and we can talk about it. But really, I'm just overseeing these parts of our ministry. Thank you. Yeah.
If you get involved in any of those Christian education events or helping with the sacrament, do I get a shirt like that?
You want this shirt?
To remind me of going to Hawaii.
If you get involved,
Because I understand if you're involved in that, you get to go to Hawaii.
see, I decided to be here and just wear the shirt.
Failed to mention, some people get to go to Hawaii. Other people just get Hawaiian shirts. I just got a patriotic shirt. I don't know where this came from. I will mention this concerning baptism. For a while, we have not had baptismal certificates, and we do now. And so we're a little backlogged, and so we will get those baptismal certificates to those who are recently baptized or their parents, as the case may be. Barb, you want to come up with one last time? All right. Barb, you also get a hat trick along. That's 3 in a row.
I get a ticket to Hawaii.
That's right.
I could take that. Okay, so now I'm finishing up with WOW, and before I say anything, I have to say, just because I'm talking doesn't mean I have that much to do with it. There was me and Sarah Freswick and Monique Gardner who started this giant project, which I think we didn't think was that giant when we started. But it's been a massive ministry to start up. There's been a lot of people working with it. We have children's classes. Some of the curriculum we use there is we have an apologetics class. We have one that's learning each line of the Apostles' Creed. And we have one that's talking about covenants, all the different covenants in Scripture. There's also a junior high and girls study. And there's the adults and the men's studies here. I will say we've had started high. We've gone down a little bit. But I will say we've seen a lot of attendance, especially within the men's and women's Bible study, that we have not seen in prior years. Having them on nights at the same time has helped a lot of husbands and wives be able to attend when they have not felt like they can in prior years, which was part of our biggest goal here. Beth and Willie have handled the meals beforehand, which is a ginormous task, and they do it very well, and that's a whole bunch of work there. We have a lot of volunteers that make it happen. But I will have to mention we are still running on a kind of a skeleton crew. We don't have a lot of people to step in if we need help, and we're tasking a lot of the volunteers we have. So if you are interested in helping, that would be awesome. It does not have to be the kind of commitment where you have to do work during the week or even prepare. Sometimes we just need somebody in the nursery or somebody to just help out with a class when there's a teacher missing. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to commit more than that evening to it. So I'm going to ask for prayer too with that. I think we need to continue to pray to determine if this is something we like, something we think is successful. Again, feedback is always, you can always talk to me about it, but pray for that. And if you feel led to come help serve, we can always find a place for you. I think that's it.
Okay, well, I'll be speaking to nursery because Kelly Nagel is. Hey, everybody. So nursery continues to go well. There's a stable number of volunteers. We've lost some recently, so the number of volunteers are getting a little bit low. And with a full set of folks who are able to serve in the nursery, if we had every position filled, it would be, I think, once every 6 weeks on rotation. Men as well as women can actually serve in the nursery. And so if you'd be willing to do that, you don't have to have children to be able to serve you. It's helpful to, like them and have some semblance of what to do with them. So we could use a few more volunteers. We could also use somebody who would be able to. We have some glass clings, so they're like transparent. And they're opaque, so light gets through. But one of the problems is kids see their parents walk by to the restroom or something like that, and they can lose their minds because they want to go with mom and dad. So Kelly was able to get some half-size glass covers, so they just need to be stuck up there if somebody would be willing to do that. And I think that, couple things that we're hoping, and these have been kind of long-standing desires that it's just kind of the grind to get to them. We are anticipating having a electronic check-in system for the nursery. We'd like to do this because we have a couple considerations. One is that we may have new volunteers in the nursery, and so if they might, our volunteers right now might know you very well, and so when you come to pick up your child, they just let them go. However, that might not be the case when we get new volunteers. They don't know who goes with who, and it's also possible that we have some parents who don't actually look like their children. And so if you're new and your child is a different race from you, you might a new volunteer might wonder, wait, I'm not sure who goes with who exactly. And so this system would work. I know, isn't that crazy? Hezekiah's like, they know me. And so, yeah, Hezekiah, buddy, we know you. And so we'd have that, and that will actually work. We're shifting over to new church management software. And so you would be able to kind of pre-register if you're a visitor and just click your name on the tab and it'll print it right out for you. We'd also like to work to make the nursery a little bit less like childcare, not make it to a full worship service, but kind of move it up, say on a scale of 1 to 10, move it up 2 to 3 notches so that even our youngest children are having a little bit of an introduction to a basic worship experience. It wouldn't be like they're not going to be preaching sermons in there, but have a little bit of a time for prayer, even for our little ones, as best we can. So that's nursery. Hospitality. Right now, lots of room for expansion of a hospitality ministry. Again, I'm overseeing this one. So what we're doing really well is we have a wonderful crew of greeters who are out there. Beth Rademacher has been organizing that, has been a wonderful part of that. And so as people come to visit, they have somebody out there to meet them and to hand them a bulletin, just welcome them in. And Jackie Bennett has been faithfully just preparing coffee every Sunday morning, and a lot of things, that just kind of happens like a miracle. I show up and the coffee's there, and Jackie's been doing the work. And so we're very thankful to she and to Beth and to all of our greeters. Some other things we'd like to develop that into, but that'll be in the future. And then staff. So as the senior pastor, I'm also the head of staff. And our staff right now is very small. It involves Andrea, who we've been very delighted to have in the office. She's been working very hard to be in contact with you, to get emails and out, bulletins ready. We've got a new directory coming out. And so all of that is a lot of work, and we're so thankful to have her there. And also Matt is Matt is a pastor, but as he's not part of the session, he is part of the staff, and of course employee of the church as well. And so the staff is kind of the employee aspect of that. We have a weekly meeting. It's short. We don't have a lot that we really need to cover, but we do it just to make sure we're communicating, and spirits are really good here in the office. Office hours are Tuesday and Thursday from 9 to 2:30. And I'm really glad to be able to have the chance to work with both of them. And it's, while we each have our own things that we're working on, being together in the office, it's a really joyous place. There are no difficulties or anything like that. So I'm thankful to both of them and thankful to be able to work with them. Before we get to the bylaws change, if the congregation would indulge me, I had an oversight in that I should have had our clerk's report on there, and I just neglected to put that on. So unless there are any objections, I'd like to invite our clerk to just give us some of the basic numbers, then we'll move on with our last item, and that'll be the evening.
As clerk, I get to know the roles and help manage those. Looking over the numbers for 2022, We added 37 members to the rolls last year. 30 of those were communicant members. 2 of them were children from the congregation, and 28 new, as well as 7 non-communicant members. Because when people come in, their children come in with them if they were baptized. We had 10 total baptisms, 4 infant and 6 professing or adult baptisms. Praise God. Leaving the rolls in 2022, you might wonder. We lost 10 people. 5 of those were being communicant members. How does that compare with 2021, you ask? We lost 74 in 2021 with 33 communicant members. But we did have a new pastor that was helping us make sure our roles and the people we were ministering to matched. So that's why there were so many off our books last year. This would leave us with 253 souls known to us on our current rolls. 52 might be considered for removal, some of which you know because they've moved out of state. We're always in flux, kind of like what's your net worth if you're worth a lot, right? You always got net inflows and outflows, so that's us. But even if you take off those 52, that leaves us with at least 201 souls for our oversight and 61 households. Currently have 3 elders and Jared. Just a thought for you there. Pray for your elders. If I can use a personal privilege clerk's report bonus, Jeff made mention of a by invitation only type of discipleship group. This was something that started with a few men getting together, namely 3 several years back. 3 doesn't work so well because what happens if one guy doesn't show up? So then that turned into 5 guys 2 years ago with the session's knowledge. So you can do things, in this church for sure. And then by God's grace, starting last fall, potentially broke in half because, of course, someone left the state and 2 became 10 men meeting at 5:30 a.m. Every other week, rain or shine, and then getting in each other's lives. Jared Krulish recently added another intentional discipleship opportunity in the morning, 6 a.m.s, and that one is open invitation. So if you want to roll into one of those or in the future get into a closed group, it's not a hidden thing. It's always been an open thing, even if that's a closed group. Thank you.
Okay, those 6 a.m. meeting. I can't do 5:30. I can barely make it at 6. But 6 a.m. That's nearly every Thursday. Okay, so last item of business. Thank you, everybody. You've moved through. You've been patient and very kind. So last one, we have a proposed change to our bylaws. And so what you have going out to you is that proposed change. If you want to see what our bylaws are right now, just erase what's underlined and add what's struck out. This change would strike those things stricken there and striked in your on the page there and add what is underlined. And so I just want to explain this briefly because as the moderator of the congregational meeting, I am here to moderate any discussion. I'm here to make sure that discussion goes well. I have a neutral position in this. I don't have a vested interest in the outcome. I'm not even a member of the congregation. And so as moderator, I want to make sure that we have a good discussion. At the outset, I'll remind you, and I don't think that we need this, but it's always good to be said rather than, I wish I had said that. If you have an opinion on it, it's great. If you're a voting member here in the church, meaning a communicant member, then you're welcome to express your opinion on that. And I'll just remind you that you are to address the issues, not individuals. So we don't want to say, well, I think so-and-so, he's so good that we don't ever want to give him a sabbatical or something like that. We want to keep it about the issues themselves. So I'll read it for you. Well, so first we would need a motion. I know this has been previewed for me, but we need formally a motion and a second that our bylaws would be amended as described. Okay, so we have the motion and we need a second. We have a second. So motion is now on the floor. And so Justin, this is your opportunity to speak to that, to this motion. We should have, I apologize, we really should have a microphone.
Testing.
Oh, there we go. Hot dog. Bill, if you could bring it up. Justin is the mover. You get to be the first shaker.
So I've been a deacon here for 15 years. I've had one sabbatical, and it has been a wonderful and tiring 15 years. This is a combination of the deacons that were in attendance within the diaconate and active. So Willie was not involved in the discussions last year, but the diaconate met multiple times and was very keen to bring in term limits. That was the general consensus within the diaconate, and not to have lifetime service with no end in sight of being an active member of the diaconate. So that is the reason that we as individuals, because the diaconate board didn't bring this forward, I guess the individual did, into the change in the bylaws. Is that good?
That's fine. Would you like to describe what's here, or would you like me to?
I can describe it.
Sure.
The change would be to serve a 3-year term and then choose to go on a 1-year sabbatical or choose to attend another 3-year term. And at the end of a 6-year term, if you chose to do 3 years, you would be forced, or you would be held to a 1-year sabbatical. And at the return of a sabbatical, as per the bylaw change, the congregation would be required to vote you back into serving as an active deacon, and not just by default. You can come right back into the diaconate and come back. So, as I understand it, that would be the significant change, would be voting back in to be a sitting deacon.
That's right.
Yes.
I
I can be done right now. You can ask questions.
Yes. So this is what can happen right now. You can ask questions, and those questions are properly addressed to me, and then I'll direct them as needed. You can make a motion to amend what is here, which means you'd like to change it slightly, keeping in the general spirit with it. You can move a substitute, which would be a radical change, or you can simply wait to vote yes or no. And you can, of course, stand up to speak in favor of or against this motion, and you're also welcome to ask questions. So, Elaine, you're up with the first question. And could we just, I do want to make sure you have the microphone, if you don't mind. Hit the button. Just tap it.
Testing.
Okay. So, Mr. Moderator, why multiples of 3 would be one of my questions. Couldn't it, is that in stone? And then the next one is, why would someone we've already elected to be a deacon need to be elected again? Is there some concern that he's changed, or? Those would be my questions.
The 3, simply because that's what was suggested by the deacon, or I guess technically by the mover. And so the 3 years could be amended. And as for the vote back on, I think I'd like to ask our Justin if you could respond to that with the microphone, please, Bill.
The thought behind voting back on is that the church here is constantly changing. The members here are constantly changing, and life changes for a deacon. So after 6 years or 7 years with a sabbatical, there is a desire to get a consensus from the congregation again that they would like that individual serving as a deacon. So that was the thought behind that.
Justin, would you hand the microphone to Beth there?
My question is, what is there a biblical reason we would want to make the change, or is this just something that people want to do? Because I just didn't know if we're having our elders serve a lifetime member and the deacons. Biblically, it looks to me like this should be the same. So I'm just asking.
I'm not aware of any, Justin, if there's a biblical case that you'd like to make. I'm not,
I
the
have
argument
no
is not
biblical,
presented here, so.
I have no biblical case for serving a lifetime or not.
Mr. March, I saw next, and then Steve.
But the ordination stands for lifetime.
Yeah, I should point that out. So this is something I can't speak to. Once ordained in the PCA, whether or not you are serving in a particular church or any church, you are still considered to be ordained to that office. So your husband, Beth, if he were to take a sabbatical and then decide not to come back to the diaconate 10 years from now, he is still considered to be a deacon. And so there's the office, and then from which you could only be demitted, and then there is to be seated, which to have a place at the table or not. So one could be a deacon but not seated, just like Luke Soje right now is an elder in the PCA, but he's not seated on the session. Yeah, Steve Riemann had the microphone next.
Yeah, I'm going to speak to the fact I like the proposal in a certain way, because I think personally, this is a personal opinion, that it should include the elders. I don't think that there is anything biblical nor anti-biblical about the length of a term of service. I also don't think they have to be the same. I know that deacons tend to be younger men, younger families, newly married or not. They don't have to be married necessarily, but normally they're in the younger category, and the elders may or may not be in the same position. But for younger families, the commitment required for deacons, the commitment required for elders is very similar. In fact, the monthly meetings or biweekly meetings or weekly meetings at times can be the same, whether you're trying to take care of the church facility itself, take care of the needs of the congregation financially or anything like that. It may require visiting for the deacons. The same is true of the elders. And I believe that every person who is married requires, after a certain period of time, a break from that constant pressure. So I believe that this should include the elders. And I don't think they have to be the same terms of service, but I think that the congregation would be better suited to additionally add the elders into this. That's what I think it should have included from the beginning, but it didn't. And the other change I see in here, you kind of wipe out the whole idea of a board of deacons by striking that out of the bylaws of the congregation. The way this thing is written, it pretty well wipes out the status of a board of deacons. Is that the intended idea?
No, Steve. So one of the rules of the PCA is that the Book of Church Order will
Yes, and I read that.
Will always override the bylaws, and so that our deacons, if we have deacons, they are automatically organized into a board by the BCO.
Okay.
And so the absence of the phrase Board of Deacons is immaterial.
Okay. And the same thing in the Book of Church Order is not a requirement. I believe, and I think that that's a misunderstood thing in the congregation, that there is a difference between a term of service and ordination. And I think you did a good job of explaining that. And I think it's important for all members to understand that, always, because there is a difference between ordination and terms of service. I think the biggest challenge that we faced in this church over the years is that people get burned out by terms of service, by lifetime terms of service. So anyway, that's my opinion.
Okay, so that was a speech in favor of.
It's in favor of part of it. No, I'm not in favor of this thing as written.
Okay, so that was a very positive speech against.
I think you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. I am not in favor of it as written.
Okay,
Okay?
there you go. I saw Jay next, so we'll go to Jay and then Matt and then Christine.
First of all, I wonder if our moderator is going to wonder if we're for or against just to balance the playing field. That's what we do at Presbytery. So I think I'm rising to stand in favor of this motion. Little background, PCA, when it formed, made up of the North and the South, different types of churches. We knew we were a big mix. So both terms of service and not terms of service are options in the PCA. So we're not doing anything novel, whether we do it terms of service or not. Our deacons came and made this request. So that's the main reason why I rise to speak in favor of the motion. I could be moved on length or whether they needed voted back on, but if the deacons want terms of service, it's allowed, and I rise in favor. Happy to run the mic to the next person.
Okay, that would be Matt Forster and then Christine.
My question is fairly simple. Is there any ramifications for, like, retroactively for deacons who have already served a long time? Like, would Justin be considered to have already served, past those terms, or not? Anyway, that's it.
So the question is, if passed, would everybody who has been on for 3 or 6 years immediately be sent on to a sabbatical and leave us with no? I don't think that's the case. I think there's the rule and then the implementation of it, which is pretty well recognized that as on the initial landing, as you're getting things going, there's a wise implementation of that. And so it would likely be a deacon or two, depending on how many we have. A deacon would begin a sabbatical, and those who had been longest would be next as we got that rotation going. I can't speak to the details. I don't know who that would be or when, but yeah, it wouldn't clear things out, I don't believe. Christine had the microphone next.
Okay, my question is on the timing of the sabbatical versus elections. So depending on if they want to take 3 years or 6 years, their sabbatical might be 2 years if we have an election every other year. Is that something we want, or would we, like, if a guy comes back and he says, you know what, after 1 year, I would like to jump right back in, would we hold a special election, or would we say, no, wait till the following election cycle?
That's a very good question. The election would be held for that particular deacon as he came back. Yes, and then Harry. Yeah, I saw you next.
In the Book of Church Order, it actually says If it's more than a year, there has to be an election. If
That-
it's more than a year break, it has to be an election.
That's right. So if
So
what
that's why the Book of Church Order actually deals with that.
Yeah. So what Steve is getting at here is that if the according to the BCO, if a individual if an officer just doesn't show up and doesn't, let's say Jay stopped showing up at session meetings and did nothing that elders do, after a year we would be required to remove him for not fulfilling his duties. And so that would mean that for him to step back on and do those duties, he would have to be elected back onto the session. But there's no reason, we do have annual elections, but there's no reason. And there are even some, I haven't parsed this out, there were some that would suggest that the sabbatical itself is a part of the service. And so that time away would not be considered neglect of duties, but actual fulfillment thereof. Harry's next. So, but the important point is, yeah, if somebody came back on, they would be, it's been a year. Okay, we'll schedule the vote for, the Sunday, for that nearest Sunday or whatever that would be. Harry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm just thinking about if after the 2-3 year terms that you had said there, and then they have to be reelected to come back in, right? For whatever, reason that they don't. If you come up short-handed for some other reasons of deacons, then they get overwhelmed because then you don't have other deacons trained and, whatever, right? And maybe have to ask elders or someone else fill in, whatever. But if that were to be the case, like all of a sudden, like 2 people from this church just moved to Houston, right? And I think they held like positions here or something like that, right? So then can that person, if that deacon doesn't get reelected after the 6 years or, 2-3 year terms, and you're shorthanded, can that deacon that didn't get elected help out and carry some of the load until other deacons can come in? Are you following what I'm asking? Because if they were not elected, then, well, the congregation can be like, what are they doing? We didn't elect them, right?
Yes. So if someone was not elected as a deacon, they could not serve as a deacon.
And even though they're a deacon for life.
That's right. So this change to the bylaws has the force of a vote of the congregation. This is why the session couldn't just decide this. You as the congregation call the deacons. And so you are also, what this does is this insists that after 3 or 6 years, a deacon must take a sabbatical. There is that clause concerning a disproportionate number of deacons, so that a deacon may be elected to an additional year of service before a sabbatical, but that's the only provision. And so in a case like that where all of a sudden almost all the deacons move to Houston or go to Hawaii, then the church would have a lack of deacons. So the congregation would have to make a change in order to bring that individual back off his sabbatical. Because you're creating a rule here that explains what must happen.
So yeah, that makes sense in my brain.
Okay.
Explain to me, but
great. So again, we've got. Did I mention anybody first? So Ross. Okay, if we could get the microphone over there, and again, you can speak in favor, against. You can suggest an amendment, a substitution. You can ask a question, or I should mention that when you feel that debate has gone on and everything that has been said needs to be said, you can move to call the question. That means I'd like to vote on this now. That requires a 2/3 majority. So you want to make sure that every new voice has been heard.
More of a question. So with the terms, would they start in like January Everyone would serve their 3-year term starting January to January. And in the case that everyone or a majority of the deacons leave for one reason or another, could we have a special election at that time, and then they would serve a slightly shorter term to get onto that January schedule again?
So it doesn't, the 3 years would actually, as it's written, the 3-year term would be from the date of their installation into the office. And so that's kind of when the clock would start, so to speak. And so there may be a kind of a staggered effect. The congregation could, according to this, could hold on to a deacon for an additional year, and presumably could make a special rule. I'd want to check with the session on the interpretation of that, but presumably could take an additional 6 months or something like that. And whether that would be in order, I'd have to investigate. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say that I'm in favor of the motion as written. I see how Steve is concerned as far as the elders are concerned, and I think that should be something that's probably addressed at a later time. But we have a couple elders with young elders that we're looking at young elders with young families, and I just have a concern that with the young families for being an elder for life, that there's quite a commitment there with their young families they need to consider first.
Okay. Right. Okay. And then
I would say I'm in favor of terms in general. I have been since I became a deacon 7 or 8 years ago. My question, and for elders and for deacons as well, terms, I'm in favor of both. But my question is, does it need to be this detailed in the bylaws, or could we have a simple phrase such as deacon shall serve for a term as specified by the session? I'm a little afraid we're setting ourselves up for another meeting next year where we have to change it again because there's some unforeseen circumstance.
You could certainly, that would be a substitute motion that you could make that change, and then what that would be is have the effect of the congregation putting its authority to call. So this is the most congregationally focused writing of it, and it puts the authority with the congregation that votes. If the congregation wishes to delegate that authority to another body, I think that's allowable. But that would be, but you would have to make a substitute motion to put that forward. Okay, yeah, microphone right up here, please.
I agree with Steve and with Joel. I think this ought to be for elders too. I also believe Joel just stated a very good problem. Why are we being so detailed with it? Let's keep it simple, stupid. Let's keep it so we can understand it and still have our men available. And several folks have said, well, why do they have to be retrained and brought in? To me, once an elder, always an elder. If you're ordained as an elder, if you're ordained as a deacon, it's for life. Now, you don't have to serve for life. You serve your 6 years, take a year off, come do another 6 years. You can do 3 years and say, hey, folks, my family's not in the position right now. I got to go do something else. But you can still help with communion as an elder. You can still help with the collection of offering as a deacon, whether you're on service right then or not. You know, we've had several people being, hey, we don't have somebody today. You got to come and do the offering plate. Hey, that's cool. That's good training. But in doing this, a guy doesn't have to go through another 6 months or another year of training. He's been trained. You know he's been trained. If the congregation still feel he's been trained, let him be on that, elected right now back to the board. You know, you don't have to make it difficult. You don't have to make it a long process. We need folks, and we need them now.
Mhm.
So let's work on that.
There's no training. There's no training required by this change to the bylaws. So I don't think it would be expected that a deacon coming off of sabbatical would have to go through a whole deacon training. Concerning a couple people have mentioned the elders joining with this as well. As this was initially presented to you 2 weeks ago, it was presented as a change to the bylaws concerning the deacons. The reason that I'm not offering to make a change, an amendment, or even a substitution is I think that I could imagine that someone's attendance at this meeting and their choice to attend might be radically different if they had known that elders might be facing a similar change. And so I would rule that out of order. I'm hearing that I would like to, people say, I'd like to change that to include elders. I would just say, I don't think that would be allowed or appropriate. Another change could be made at a later date, sent out to the congregation, and we could have a meeting about that. If you wish to challenge that, so I would rule that out of order. If you wish to challenge that, then you may do so. It's called challenging the chair. It's not personally offensive at all. And we'd have to have a vote, and there'd be a 2/3 majority required to overturn the decision of the chair. Lyle, I see thank you, Linda, for your contribution. Okay, could we make sure you have the microphone, please?
It's related to point of order. So
Okay.
if there was a completely different replacement amendment, it would have to be noticed.
Yes.
And it would have to happen 2 weeks from now.
Yes.
Got it. Thanks. That's all.
And that's the reason I am against this proposal, because I believe that it would have to be completely different. I don't want to amend this. I don't want to pass it because I think it should include the elders.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Further comments, or Lyle, did you wish to
Yeah,
speak?
if no one's in front of me, yeah.
Yeah, please.
I'll speak in favor of it, and there may be a point, as Joel said, to make it a little looser so that there's some discretion at the point. But I'd be in favor of, I'm in favor of speaking for it, and then to bring up a compendium or a later one addressing elders another time so that we can deal with it as written now.
Okay. Yeah, as you've had the microphone, I want to give somebody else a chance, and then we'll come back to you. We've got Bill. You had your hand up, Bill. Did you want to speak?
Am I next?
You're next.
Thanks. I'd speak in favor of the motion with a reservation. Mr. Moderator, I'm in favor of the motion because the deacons pretty strongly presented their desire as consensus. And based on that, I don't want to stand in their way of pushing this, of pressing forward with this. The caveat I've got is that I've seen elections in congregations where there are terms of service, and the slate of candidates put forward at a particular cycle was not the best quality. That's a risk of going to terms. That, okay, we're losing one of our deacons or two or some number of our deacons because they're termed out. We got to have somebody. And we wind up with somebody that's, we wouldn't have wanted him if we hadn't lost that other deacon because he termed out. So that's my caveat to the congregation. I'm speaking in favor, but there's a risk here that when it comes election time, make sure that we are electing good candidates. Thank you.
Okay. We'll go over to Colleen next.
I feel like Mr. March leaning in favor of this because it's been brought by the deacons. It seems to me that it is a solution to burnout. And I wonder if there could be some way. What's not setting well with me is this re-electing bit. Because if someone has served even 6 years with a sabbatical and they're still qualified, and after that year off with their family, they want to get back at it, and their family wants them to get back at it, I don't understand why they would need to be reelected if no one can bring any word forward as to why they are no longer fit to serve. So I guess that's the piece that just I don't quite understand. And if it is about burnout, is there just a way that, after 7 years and they have a year off with their families and that was great and their families still need them, they can just say with grace and dignity, I'm not coming back, and there's no, nothing to hold against them? Is there a way that could be an option? It's just the re-election that I don't understand.
Yeah. I don't know that I can speak to it might be appropriate if I heard a question there, why the re-election? I think it'd be appropriate to address that to Justin, if you'd be willing to answer that.
I'd say it goes back into leaving the power with the congregation. The individual might be ready to come back. The congregation might not want them to come back. So it gives the congregation an opportunity, written in the bylaws, opportunity to say no. For Book of Church Order, they can already say no. They can call as far as I understand it, they can call a meeting and request the session dissolve the relationship with the deacon, so they can do that already.
That's right. So the congregation already has the authority to dissolve the relationship with any officer. You could decide, we don't want Jared to be our pastor anymore, congregational meeting, and you vote that way, and I'm no longer the pastor. And that's true for ruling elders and deacons alike. I'll say it's pretty rarely used, and it tends to be, it is what it is in the book. Circumstantially, it tends to be more hostile situations. And so take that for what it's worth. But Elaine, I believe that you're next, and then we'll go back to Steve.
Didn't someone say that the Book of Church Order demands that there be a re-election if someone's been gone more than a year? But if they're gone just a year, there doesn't need to be a re-election.
Yes. So technically, what the BCO demands is that the session would dissolve the relationship with an officer who has failed to fulfill his duties.
But that's not what we're talking about. They're not failing to fulfill their duties. We're making them take a year off. So that's different.
Right. The BCO doesn't actually demand a vote back on but again, the clock is up to a year.
And maybe this is a Cox thing, I don't know. But the re-election bothers me as well. And Justin's point that the church may have changed is one of the reasons why it bothers me. One of the reasons we asked for lifetime commitments was for consistency, continuity, protecting the congregation and the church. And so that's the hardest part for me. I'm in favor of giving them the opportunity to take the sabbaticals, absolutely, and making it easier for them to do that. I'm not in favor of requiring an election again.
If you wanted to make that change, that would be an amendment. You're welcome to propose that as an amendment. Okay. That would be for a new, so you can make an amendment, you can make a substitution for something that would be new. That takes 2 weeks, according to the bylaws themselves.
I just have a quick question, and maybe Justin would be able to answer this. What was the reasoning behind, or is there something sacred to the deacons about a 3-year term? Is it because of the full 7-year cycle, or what is that something that's really important to the deacons?
I would say it was a amount of time that we thought was good for service within the diaconate, and appropriate for length of time to work and then have a timeout.
We haven't heard from Glenn yet, and I'm sorry, Ellen, we haven't heard from you yet, so let me have Ellen, who had her hand up first, and then Glenn. I'm trying to get to the first hands that I see, but favoring people who haven't spoken yet, or spoken less.
I'm in favor of the term limits because that's what they want also. What I don't understand is the second point that requires an election if they desire to stay or ask to stay an additional year after the 3 years because of the available deacons. And it seems that that is superfluous to have an additional election to work another year. So I would strike that whole second paragraph and then amend the first one to say 3 years, ideally, and if there's coverage, sabbaticals could be allowed, because it would be rolling years anyway, right? Because of when deacons start or when they are joining the session. Or maybe you could speak to that, why you would be elected to serve an additional, after your additional year, and then still allowed the 3 years. But if, I don't know, that doesn't make sense to me. I don't think I described that very well.
Okay, so I'm going to receive that, Ellen. I'm going to receive that as a amendment to strike the second paragraph entirely. And Mr. Clerk, if I can make sure that you've got good notes on this, and then add the word after the very first sentence: deacon shall serve for a term of 3 years, comma, ideally, which introduces the idea of some flexibility there. And so is there, do we have a second for that amendment? Okay. No, we have a motion being introduced, and so that needs to go forward first. So we do have a second, and so that's on the floor now. And so we'll have to dispose of this amendment before we vote on the main, but we can talk about the amendment that Ellen has just proposed, and we can also talk about the main change here, which whether or not it includes that second paragraph. So, Glenn.
I'm going home.
Okay.
I'm old. I did not expect this. I think it was poor planning on someone's part to bring up this controversial thing in the evening.
Glenn, I'm going to have to ask you if you wish to speak in favor or against it. I sympathize and any difficulty this has caused, and we can always make a decision to.
I don't understand it enough to just go one way or the other.
Okay, understood. Thank you. And if the congregation wishes, we could. Feels it's going late, we can make an amendment. We could introduce the idea of recessing the congregational meeting until a certain time that is allowed. I'm doing my best to help. We sent it out ahead of time. Doing our best to help everybody move through in a reasonable way. Christine?
I would like to propose an amendment removing the elections. I feel that we already have the tools to remove a deacon who's not faithfully serving for moral reasons or whatever. And if we have to re-elect a deacon and the church decides that the church doesn't want him as a deacon, that feels like that could have some personality conflicts that perhaps maybe it'd be good for the church to have that man as a deacon if they're not removing him for moral concerns. So I propose to strike elections.
Okay, we have a second amendment which would strike, and that would be the final sentence of the first paragraph.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay. Okay, thank you. So we have a second for that. So we have two amendments on the floor, plus the main. So this is how we're going to have to proceed. You can speak for the main motion, all the same options, or for or against one of those amendments. When you're ready to vote on any of those things, make a motion to call the question. Matthew, I'm sorry, Matthew, did I skip you earlier? Oh, okay, good.
I just have a question for clarity. So for the First Amendment proposed by Ellen, striking the entire second paragraph, did I hear correctly? You were then you inserted something into the first paragraph?
Yes, that would deacon serve for a term of 3 years, ideally.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I heard correctly.
Yes, I didn't.
Yeah, I would like a third amendment, just striking all of that and simply saying deacon shall serve for a limited term as determined by this session. I really just feel this is too detailed, and I raised a point just a second ago. Lord willing, we'll have 6 new deacons here in a few months. The way this is written, in 3 years, they'd all get a sabbatical at the same time. That just seems a little bit awkward and funny, and so I trust the session implicitly to make wise decisions about deacons and elections and such. So that would be my third amendment on the table, perhaps.
Okay, I'm going to take that as a substitute motion because it's a pretty radical change.
Not sure what that means, but that's fine.
It means it's a bigger change, it's acceptable, and so we're at 3 levels, so probably shouldn't have any more amendments until we dispose of these. And so, Ross, we've got a microphone over here. Yes. We have a point of order.
Does the substitute motion take precedence over amendments?
No. It has to be disposed of before we can bring to the main. But we can amend the main a couple ways and bring a substitute.
So my question would be towards the substitute then. What would keep the session from just saying this deacon is serving, he wants to keep going, okay, he's just going to keep going for 10 years at a time, 11, 12, whatever, and say, okay, that's your term of service, as opposed to the congregation saying, hey, we want someone to serve for 3, 4, the congregation saying, this is how long you're going to serve, and then you need to take a break.
Right. Nothing. Okay. It would be that the substitute would give the session the authority to designate the terms as they saw fit.
So how is that a fundamental change from what we have right now, that a deacon can say at any time, I'm ready for a break, I would like a 1-year sabbatical, or I would like to come off of the Board of Deacons for a time, and when I'm ready, I will come back and ask to be reappointed as a serving deacon?
It doesn't change anything in the first part. In the second part, where he wants to leave for an indeterminate amount of time, if he was gone for a greater time than a year, then he would have to be voted back on according to the Book of Church Order. But for shorter than a year, there's nothing preventing the deacons or session from creating their own policies. All right. Got a hand with Matt. Go ahead.
So I'm just gonna say I support this with the 2 amendments proposed. I'm not in favor of the substitute motion, just in general, because I feel awkward because it makes it sound like I disagree with him on trusting the session. That's not it, but just in general, I'm not in favor of taking power away from a wider body of people and putting it in a narrower body of people when it's already set up for the wider body to have that authority. I think that's where the authority should stay, or maybe authority is the wrong word, but so for that reason, I'm against the substitute motion.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Glenn, we haven't heard from you.
Well, I stand in favor of the motion here as it's written. I think that, you know, we do have valid concerns with just everybody going off at once. Those are valid. However, I would then just turn us back to the Great Commission. You know, Jesus said, go out into the world and make disciples of men. So that puts it on the church body to ensure that that's what we're doing. So I think we should go with the amendment the way it is written here, and do what our calling is, to make disciples. We just went through all of the things that we're doing with men's groups and all of that. Let's have faith in our process. Let's have faith in what we're doing and trust the Lord. Make disciples of men.
Okay, do we have further comments? We've heard a lot of new comments, so that's been good discussion. If you're ready to call the question on these items, then we would need a motion to do so. Barbara? Okay. So what that means is calling the question on all matters before the House. So that means Barb is suggesting that we vote on everything now. And so this is not a debatable motion. Is this a point of order, Jeff? They're not in omnibus. Yeah. And so amendments, then substitute, then main. I think that's correct. Yes. Okay. Very good. So to call the question, that's a 2/3 majority, meaning so you're not voting on any of these items right now. You're voting on whether or not you want to end discussion. If you want to end discussion and move on to a vote, then you'll vote yes. And so all in favor of calling all matters before the House, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, I heard a 2/3 majority there. And so we'll go ahead, and our order is amendment, substitute, and then on the main. So our first amendment would insert the word ideally after that first sentence, term of 3 years, and would strike the second paragraph entirely. So we'll be voting on that now. And since the question's been called, there's no further discussion. All in favor of amending, does everybody understand what we've just done? Okay, so this is, right now we're asking the question, do you want to strike that second paragraph and add the word ideally to the first sentence? If you would like to do that, that was Ellen's motion. If you'd like to do that, then you want to vote yes in this vote right now. Is there a question, Ellen? It does not. No, you can vote for what Joel said. So basically, if you don't like the main motion, you want what Joel said, you can still improve the one to make it a better thing that you don't like. You're allowed to do that. So it might stink, but you can kind of gussy it up a little bit. So we're voting on that. We'll call it Amendment A. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? I'm going to rule that carries. If you think my count is wrong, then you can ask for division. Okay, second amendment to vote on here is the last sentence of what is now the last new paragraph. A deacon shall not return to service after a sabbatical until elected to do so by the congregation. If we make this amendment, that it would strike that sentence. Is everybody clear? So if you want to cross that last sentence out, then vote yes right now. Is that clear to everybody? Okay, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? I am going to ask for a count on that. And asking for a count, I'm going to ask you to please raise your hand. And Matt, if I could have you count, and if I could ask our clerk to count as well. just to make sure they have the right count. If you're in favor of striking that one again, if you just voted aye, you have to vote the same way. Please raise your hand so we can get an accurate count. Oh, that's much more clear to me, I think, but there's not a lot of you, so. 13, 14. And if you voted no, please raise your hand. Okay, 8, 6, 10. Okay, 17, 10. So that carries, and that last sentence is deleted. So now we have our main and our substitute. The main motion begins with the word deacons and goes down to conclusion of the second term. Everything after that is gone, and it adds the word ideally to that first sentence. And the substitute motion is deacons shall serve for a limited time as designated by the session. We have to vote on the substitute. What we're going to do now is we're going to vote and say, if you want the substitute, we have to technically make it the main motion. So you want to vote yes if you want Joel's substitute to be the thing that you ultimately vote on, yes or no. So, all in favor of the substitute motion that Joel presented to us, please say aye. All opposed? Nay. Rule that the nays carry. That's a no. Okay, and so this brings us in the end to this main motion, again, beginning with the word deacons, ending with the conclusion of the second term, and the word ideally has been inserted there, a term of ideally, of 3 years ideally. So that's the vote. All in favor of that change to the bylaws, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, say no. No. I'd like to see hands on that, please.
Could I ask you to just say that again, because I'm confused. We voted on 2, now we're
Yeah,
voting
so what we did is we amended this first thing, this big one here, and then we voted, do we want to have Joel's replace it? And you said, no, we don't. So now we come back to the amended, those, we've already voted yes on both of those amendments. They're in. They can't be undone at this point. Now you're voting on the amended final version. Yes. Yeah. Okay, so the final version says, it includes the crossouts. Deacon shall serve for a term of 3 years, ideally, after which a deacon may choose to serve a second 3-year term or take a 1-year sabbatical. If a second term is chosen, the deacon shall take 1-year sabbatical at the conclusion of the second term. And that's it. That's the end. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Point of order, I think we'll need a 2/3 vote to pass.
Oh, thank you. Yes, our bylaws themselves do require a 2/3 majority. And so, is there a question or point of order? Yes. If this gets turned down, then there's no change to the bylaws, and crumple this up and it goes away. Okay, thank you for the question and for both questions. This requires a 2/3 majority. Any further questions here? Okay, then we'll vote on this just like I just read. All in favor, we'll just go right to a hand vote. All in favor, please raise your hand. Matt, could I ask you for a count, please? Because we're going to have to do the math on this. Okay. Yeah. All right. If I'm going to make a judgment here. I'm going to ask you to put your hands down. I'm going to explain just one more time to be clear. We have amended the thing that you've got on your paper. We've changed it, and you approved those changes already. Can't be undone. So we struck that second paragraph. We struck the last line of the first paragraph. That's gone. The only thing that remains is what I read to you. That's all that there is to vote on. So you can either at this point vote yes, that's what we want to do. We want to make that change to the bylaws, or no, we don't want to change anything at all. The question. Yes. You would, so if the question is, what if I want to make some other kind of change to the bylaws on this or something else? What happens is you propose the rewrite, and you bring it to the session, and the session schedules a congregational meeting to make that change. And we schedule the meeting, and we do this just like we just did. Again, requires a 2/3 majority. So, any further questions? You all understand what you're voting on now? Okay, thank you. So, final vote, and we'll do this by hands and take account. Requires a 2/3 majority. All in favor of the motion as amended, after the changes we've made, please raise your hand. What'd you have? Did you? Okay, so yeah.
One more time. Raise your hand high and proud if you want to count.
Raise your hand nice and high. Jay, I'm just going to ask you to count your side. Matt, if you just count this side. Colleen and Harry, pick us. You got to pick a side. There you go. All right. So, okay, we're at 20. And all opposed, please raise your hand. You had 10? Okay, 16 to 20. So the motion does not carry, and the issue is concluded. There's been no change to the bylaws at this point. I want to remind you, I know this is a lot of work and longer than probably anybody anticipated, but welcome to General Assembly, welcome to Presbytery. I have to do this every 4 months. That's kind of the process, and hopefully it's been educational for you. And above all, hopefully nobody, whether you got voted for or not, whether people liked your opinion, remember, people are not voting or speaking against you as a person. We have a difference of ideas, and we have a forum in which we can work that out with maturity. So thank you for your participation, and we can close and recess this meeting with prayer. And certainly for the deacons, for us as a church. Our Father in heaven, we thank you that you have brought us to this day where we could speak and have a good conversation with one another. We pray that you would bring about mutual love and concord in this body, that we would serve one another well, that we would seek for what is going to be best for this congregation, and we certainly pray for our deacons, for our elders, but Lord, we pray for our whole congregation, officers and members alike, that you would bless us, that you would help us to love one another well, to bear fruits, the fruit of the Spirit, and to walk with you all the days of our lives. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Oh, yeah. So we have minutes, and it would be appropriate for the body to designate the session as a commission to approve the minutes, so you don't have to hear them read right now. You can all go home. Or we can read them. So moved. Is there a second? All in favor? Opposed? The session is a commission.